Welcome to the Photoshop training channel. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to add patterns or textures to text. I'll do so by showing you how to create this grungy paint peeling off effect. We'll start out by adding our text layer, and then we'll apply different layer styles to achieve the look we're going for. And for the background, I'll simply use a picture I took of my neighbor's wooden fence to complete the composition. In this tutorial, we're going to use a texture of paint peeling off a fence, but with this technique, you can use anything else that you like. But anyway, let's get started with this tutorial. I'm going to be working in a canvas that's 1080y by 720 tall. The first step is to create our text, so I'm going to click on the text tool, and I'm going to make sure that I have Arial rounded as my font and 395 points as my font size. Then I'm going to click on the canvas and type PTC. Those are the initials for the Photoshop training channel. And I'm going to use the move tool to center that. We're going to need 4 identical layers of this PTC text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the PTC text layer, and I'm going to press Control J on my keyboard. That's Command J on the Mac 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So now I have 4 identical layers. I'm going to rename the top layer to texture. The second layer will be color. The third layer will be extrusion. And the bottom layer will be drop shadow. Next, I'm going to shut off the visibility to all the layers except my drop shadow layer. Then I'm going to double click on the layer to bring up the layer style options. I'm going to click on drop shadow, and I'm going to set my opacity to 90%, my distance to 15 pixels, my size to 15 pixels, and I'm going to set my noise to about 4%. And let me show you what noise does, just in case you're wondering. I'm going to bump that up all the way to 100%, and you see what it does. It creates this shadow that's got a lot of noise in there, and that's what I want, but I don't want that much. So I'm going to bring back down to 4, and you can barely see the noise in the shadow now, which is what I want. Also, I don't want my text to be visible in this layer since I'm going to be applying color and texture in different layers. So what I'll do is I'm going to click on the blending options, and I'm going to change my fill opacity to 0%. That makes every pixel in the layer transparent except anything that we add in the layer styles. So the difference between fill opacity is that it only affects the actual layer pixels, not the layer styles, and opacity affects both. Notice that if we bring opacity down to 0%, the drop shadow that we created becomes transparent as well. So I'm going to bring that up to 100%, and I'm going to change my fill opacity to 0%. Then I'm going to press OK. And so we can see this effect better. I'm going to change my background color to something else. So I'm going to double click on my foreground color and change my brightness to about 40%. Then I'll press OK. While my background layer is selected, I'm going to hit Alt and Backspace on my keyboard to fill. That's Option Backspace on the Mac. Then I'm also going to hit this up pointing arrow right next to my layer styles, just so I can hide the options. I don't need to be looking at them now, and it's going to create some room for us to work with. And also I'm going to drag this up a little bit too. Then I'm going to turn on the visibility for my color layer, and I'm going to double click on the layer to bring the layer styles. Okay, the first thing I'm going to add is a gradient overlay, and I'm going to select 2 brown colors, and I don't really have a set color for this, but I want something of a dark brown color like that, and a lighter orange color, something like that, maybe just a little bit brighter, something like that. Press OK when you have those 2 colors selected, and press OK on the gradient editor. Then we're going to add a bevel and emboss to this, so I'm going to click on bevel and emboss, and I'm going to bring my shadow opacity to 0% and bring my highlight opacity to about 35%, something like that. I'm going to leave it at 35%. Then I'm going to change the size of this bevel to something small, something like 1 or 2%. Actually, I'll leave it at 3. 3 seems like a good number. It's looking pretty good. I'll leave it at 3 pixels. Then I'm going to click on Inner Shadow. I'm going to leave my blending mode at 5 and leave it at black. And I'm going to change the opacity to 55%. I'm going to change my distance to 0 and increase my size to 20 pixels. And you can see the result here. It's already looking pretty good. Next, I'm going to create an inner glow, and I'm going to change the yellow to a white and press OK. Change my opacity to 15%, my noise to 30%, and I'm going to increase the size of this to let's see, somewhere about, we'll make it 210%. In the range, we'll bump that up as well. We'll make it 75, maybe just a little bit more, maybe like 80%. And that's looking pretty good. You can see the noise inside of the text now. It might not be visible in the video since it's being compressed, but when you see the final result, you should be able to see the noise within the text, which is a pretty neat effect. Then we're going to add some satin to our layer, and we're going to bring the opacity way down, just so it barely shows, something like 5% or so should do. We're going to increase the distance just a little bit, maybe 20% or 15 or 20. Well, we'll leave it at 15 and increase the size to about 35. And we're going to change the contour of this just to a straight line. Something like that. That looks much better. And finally, we're going to add a drop shadow. And this drop shadow is going to be 65%, maybe just a little more. 69%, might as well make it 70. We'll leave it at 70%. Change the distance a little more, something like 10 pixels, and bring the size up a little bit more, like 15. 18 pixels seems to do the job, so I'll leave it there. And add just a little noise to that as well. We'll leave that at 5. And it's creating this cool noise effect around the shadow, which is looking pretty cool. And when we have all these settings, we'll press OK. And once again, we'll click on the arrow so we can have a little more space in our layers panel. And why don't we work on our extrusion layer? And what I'm going to do is a cool little nifty trick to fake 3D. So with your extrusion layer selected, press Ctrl T on your keyboard or Command T on the Mac to bring up the transform tool. And you can click and drag to transform this if you want to. But what we're going to do is you're going to hold Shift and hold Alt to transform from the center. So when you do this, you can see how it's already creating this 3D effect. So I'm holding Alt and Shift, that's Option Shift on the Mac. And I'm just going to bring that in just a little bit, like so. So we can see the 3D happening here and here. Maybe just a little more. Something like that. Then I'm going to press Enter. And that's our fake 3D. And then I'm going to double click on the layer to bring up my styling options. And the first thing I'm going to add is a color overlay. And I'm going to select a dark brown color. Something like so. Something like that. Then I'll press OK. Then I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. And I'm going to change the depth to 75%. And bring down my highlight mode just a little bit, maybe actually more than that. Let's just make it an even 40. In my shadow, we'll change that to 20%. Then I'll add an inner shadow, and I'm going to uncheck the global light checkbox, and I'm going to change that just a little bit. Move it over to the side a little bit. So maybe 153 seems to be okay. I'm going to bring my distance down just by 1 pixel, and I'm going to add a choke of 10% and a size of 8 pixels for my inner shadow. And of course, I'm going to add some noise. This time I'll add about 10% of noise. And then I'm going to add an inner glow. And for the inner glow, I'm going to select black. That's my fill color. Change the blending mode to normal. And bring it down in size just a little bit, maybe 3 pixels. and then I'll press OK. I'm going to go ahead and close the effects to keep everything nice and tidy. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add the texture to the text. And we're going to be using, of course, this texture layer here. But what we need to do first is actually create the texture for the text. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a file. And I'm going to select this file titled Texture. Click on Open. And this is going to be the texture that we're going to use for our text. Now, what we need to do is remove the fence and leave the red paint. So I'm just going to create a quick adjustment here to get a better color for our paint. So I'm going to go to Levels and just give it a little more contrast, like so. So all I did is I brought in the darks and brought in the lights, and it created more contrast. Then I'll press OK. Then I'm going to go into my channels, and I'm going to click through all the channels and see which one has more contrast. And it looks like green, between green and blue, and actually green. There's more difference between the lights and darks. So I'm going to click on that channel. I'm going to duplicate it. Then I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, and Levels, and I'm going to bring in the darks and bring in the lights as much as I can, like so. Then I'll press OK. Now I'm going to make a selection out of this, but if I press Control click right now or Command click on the Mac, it's going to select the white pixels, and I want the opposite thing. I want to select the dark pixels. So I'm going to press Control I or Command I on my keyboard to invert those. Then I'll click Control or Command on the green copy mask. Then I'm going to go back into my layers, click on my background, but notice that it's got a lock because it's a background layer. So all you need to do is just double click on it. This window's gonna come up, just press OK, and now the lock is gone, and you can apply a layer mask to that. And once you do, you're left with only the red, which is the paint peeling off the fence. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make this into a seamless texture. So no matter how many times this is tiled, there will not be a seam. So to do that, I'm going to apply the layer mask. That way we don't have to worry about that. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to create a guide splitting this in half vertically, and another guide splitting this horizontally. So I'm going to go into View, New Guide, 50%, View, New Guide, 50% horizontal this time, and now we have a guide splitting everything. I'm going to click on my marquee tool, and I'm going to select the left half. I'm going to go into Layer, New, Layer via Cut. What that does is it will split this into two layers. So the left side and the right side. I want to bring the left side over to the right, and the right over to the left. And the reason we're doing this is when we tile this, the left side and the right side will always match, and there will not be a line or a seam between both of them. What we gotta do now is I'm gonna press Control H, by the way, to hide these guides so you can see what we're gonna do now. So what we're gonna do now is only worry about the seam here in the middle. So I'm gonna zoom in. It's actually not bad. Actually, I don't really see much of a seam other than here, just a straight line here. And what I'm gonna do is, it's from that layer, so I'm gonna add a layer mask, and I'm just gonna select one of these brushes, one of these grunge brushes, and make sure my foreground's set to black. And I'm just gonna, actually this is not working as well as I had hoped. I was gonna use a different technique, but I changed my mind as I was doing the tutorial, since I thought this would be easier, and I guess it is a little bit easier. It's not as good as I had hoped, but it's gonna get the job done. As long as there's no straight lines, you should be okay. And that works. That's a pretty good job we did here. And actually, let me just add that little gap there. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and apply this layer mask, and I'm gonna merge these two layers into one layer. So now, no matter how many times this tiles, you will not see a seam. So if I bring this over to the left and duplicate the layer and bring that over to the other side, it matches perfectly, as you can see. Anyway, I'm going to just press Ctrl-Alt-C to undo those changes. And now we got to do the same thing for the top and bottom. So I'm going to bring my guides back by pressing Ctrl-H or Command-H on the Mac. Select the top half, go into Layer, New, Layer be a cut, and now we split it in half once again. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just bring that down, and I'll bring the other half up. I'm going to press Ctrl-H, Command-H on the Mac to hide my guides. And as you can see, we're going to have a little more work on this half. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to bring the top half down just a little bit. And I'm going to put that on the top layer. And I'm going to add a layer mask. And I'm just going to start drawing once again with the same brush. Just make sure there's no straight lines. And I'm going to add a layer mask on the layer on the bottom, and I'll do the same thing. Just make sure there's no straight lines. And that looks good. I'm just going to highlight both of those layers by holding Shift and clicking on both of them. Then I'll press Ctrl-E or Command-E on the keyboard to make them into one layer. Then I'm going to press Control or Command on my keyboard and click on the layer to select everything. I'm going to go into Image and Crop to crop the extra space out. I'm going to press Ctrl-D to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is just double click on the layer, and we're going to add a stroke. It's going to be more of a shadow than a stroke actually. So I'm just going to set my size to 1. Outside is fine, and I'm going to bring the opacity down to, I don't know, maybe 50. 60 might be too much. 45% I think will be okay. Press OK, and actually, you know what, just to check that, I'm going to create a layer. I'm going to fill it with white just so I can see if it's going to look okay, and I think it'll look okay. I think that's okay. So I'm just going to delete this layer, and now we're ready to make this into a pattern, which we're going to use in our text layer. So I'm going to go into Edit, Define Pattern, and I'm going to call this Peeling Paint. Then I'll press OK. I'm going to come back into the composition we were working on. I'm going to turn on my texture layer. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to change my fill opacity to 0. Then I'm going to click on Pattern Overlay, and then I'm going to select the pattern we just created, which is the very last one here at the bottom. And there it is. I'm going to move this just a little bit to the side here so you can see it better. I guess we'll just look at these two letters. And you can do two things. You can scale this down to 50% if you wanted to, 200%, or anywhere really, all the way up to 1000% or 1%. We're going to leave this at 50%. You can also click and drag the pattern so you can find the appropriate spot. So let me just find a good spot. Something like that. And I'm also going to add a bevel and emboss, because there's a bevel here, but it gets cut off by the texture. I'm going to click on bevel and emboss, and I'm going to set my size to 1, bring the blending mode to overlay, and bring that down to about 32%, and this to about, I don't know, 45%. Then press OK. And this is our result. Now, if you wanted to, you can go back into your color, and you can change the gradient to any other color. So let me just click on these presets here just so you can see how that works. So you can use any color you want in the background. It doesn't have to be a gradient. It could be a color overlay and whatever you want. And the texture is not affected by the changes we make onto the color layer. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Also, if you decided that you did not want to use a pattern overlay, you can also use a texture overlay, and it creates this bevel emboss effect. So maybe you just want to have the texture but no color added, you can, and you can scale that, of course, and you can increase its depth or decrease it. I'm just gonna go ahead and press cancel on that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in our background. So I'm going to go into File, Open, Fence. I'm going to open that up. And I'm just going to go ahead and right click on that, click on Duplicate Layer, and bring that into our texture.psd document that we're working on. Press OK. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And our fence, I'm going to rename that actually. And our fence was brought in to our composition, and I'm going to drag that all the way to the bottom, right above the background. And I'm going to press Ctrl T to transform this. I'm going to right click on my layer and click on Rotate Counterclockwise. So now the wood panels are going horizontally as opposed to vertically. And I'm just going to find a good spot for this. And you know what? Maybe I need to resize it. So I'm just going to press Control 0 on my keyboard, 0 on the number pad, and it's going to zoom all the way out so I can see all of the control handles here. And I'm going to zoom in to about 50%. I'll just type 50 on there. And I gotta find a good spot for this. Maybe increase the size just a little bit. Something like that. Then I'm going to press Z on my keyboard to bring up my zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in. And I like everything. The only thing I don't like is this gap here. So let me see if this works. I'm just going to create I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Just going to click on my marquee tool and create a little square like so. Press Ctrl T and then just drag that all the way to the right. Just to fill that with black. And yeah, we'll just go all the way. And then press Enter, deselect. I'm going to press on my zoom tool once again by pressing Z on the keyboard, right clicking and clicking on Fit to Screen, and look at that. The gap is gone. Perfect. And I want to change the background just a little bit, so I'm going to go into Image, Adjustment, Curves. I'm going to create an S curve to give it just a little more contrast. And you know what? I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm going to press Ctrl Z. It's always better to create adjustment layers, so I'm going to do the same thing. Click on Curves and create an adjustment layer, an S curve, and actually let me give myself a little more space so I could really see. Let me just start over again. S curve. Something like that. That looks pretty good. I'm going to add another adjustment layer, and this time I'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to move the hue to the right a little bit just to make it a little browner, like so. So this is after and that's before. It's a little reddish, but I wanted it just a little browner. And you know what? I'm going to do one other trick to this. I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to set it to overlay. And this time I do want to do it in the actual layer. I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and desaturate. It creates this cool effect there, but it might be a little too strong, so I'm going to set it all the way to 0. I'm just going to bump it up until I find a good spot, so maybe 45%. And I'm going to create one other layer at the very top, and I'll call this layer Vignette. And I'm going to zoom and fit to screen. Actually, I'm going to zoom out just so I can see more than the screen. I'm going to select my brush tool, select a soft brush, 175 pixels, maybe more, 319, 20 pixels should be okay. And I'm going to set my foreground color to black, and I'm just going to paint with black, like so. And again, I don't have to be perfect, not for this effect at least. And I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 80%, maybe 70%. And that's before, that's after, and this is before. So it kind of centers everything into the text there. And you know what? Let me just try something. If I bring this up here, no, not much change. It's still looking a little brighter than I had hoped. So maybe my S curve is a little too strong. Let me darken that up a little bit. And yeah, I think that's looking a little bit better. And you know what? I just realized that I missed one step. On our extrusion layer, we also gotta add the same pattern, pattern overlay, so we can maintain the effect. So I'm gonna click on pattern overlay, and I'm gonna select the same pattern. This one has a color overlay, as you can see, so I'm gonna bring that color overlay down a little bit, so 50%. That should be okay. Click on pattern overlay and move that around until you'll find a good spot for your pattern. So I'm gonna get something that's got a lot of detail, maybe something like that. It's dark and it's light and it's got, you can see that there's things going on there, but it's too dark, so somewhere along there I think it's better. Then I'll press OK. Yeah, and it's looking pretty good here as well. Okay, and now that I see this, I think we need to add on our color layer, I think we need to add or change at least our drab shadow. So I'm going to click on use global light. That way we don't change the perspective of anything else. And just add a little, just drag it all a little bit more to the right so we can get the shadows casted on the extrusion layer just a little bit better. And then press OK. And that's it for this tutorial. As always, I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. Leave any comments or questions down below, or head over to my Facebook page and leave them there if you like. Also, feel free to share with me any designs you come up with using this technique. I would love to see your stuff. And don't forget to subscribe to my free newsletter where I provide subscriber-only content. Just enter your email address in the box on the top right side of my website, photoshoptrainingchannel.com. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.